A new report says famine is imminent in northern Gaza, where 70% of the remaining population is experiencing catastrophic hunger. Today is Tuesday, March 19th, 2024, and this is the Dunkley Report. A new report says famine is imminent in northern Gaza, where 70% of the remaining population is experiencing catastrophic hunger. It says a further escalation of the war could push around half of Gaza's total population to the brink of starvation. The report came from the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, an initiative set up by UN agencies, aid groups, and others to determine the severity of food insecurity. Israel faces mounting pressure from even its closest allies to streamline the entry of aid into the Gaza Strip and to open more crossings. Israeli forces, meanwhile, launched another raid on the Gaza Strip's largest hospital, saying it killed a Hamas commander who was hiding there. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has agreed to send a team of Israeli officials to Washington to discuss with Biden administration officials a prospective Rafah operation, according to White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Sullivan says each party is making clear to the other its perspective. The White House has been skeptical of Netanyahu's plan to carry out an operation in the southern city of Rafah, where about 1.5 million displaced Palestinians are sheltering as Israel looks to eliminate Hamas following its deadly October 7th attack. Biden and Netanyahu spoke on Monday for the first time in more than a month. President Vladimir Putin has extended his reign over Russia in a landslide election whose outcome was never in doubt, declaring his determination to advance deeper into Ukraine and dangling new threats against the West. After the harshest crackdown on dissent since Soviet times, it was clear from the earliest returns that Putin's nearly quarter-century rule would continue with a fifth term that grants him 6 more years in power. Still, Russians heeded a call to protest Putin's repression and his war in Ukraine by showing up at polling stations at noon on Sunday. With nearly all the precincts counted Monday, election officials said Putin had secured a record number of votes. Millions of Germans have been protesting against the rise of the far right in huge rallies all over the country for weeks in a row, attending events with slogans such as "Never Again is Now." Demonstrations in big cities such as Berlin, Munich, Hamburg, or Dusseldorf have drawn hundreds of thousands of participants at a time. The protesters have been alarmed by the growing popularity and policies of the far-right Alternative for Germany, or FD Party. But while the Populist Party has been on the rise for years, the current outrage against it was triggered by a report last month that right-wing extremists met to discuss the deportation of millions of immigrants, including some with German citizenship. Democracy takes many forms, and some are more direct than others. In Vermont, the tradition of town meeting is very direct. Consider Elmore, where on a recent day the business of running a town and participating in its administration was thrown open to everyone for the yearly meeting. The nuts and bolts of town business and decision-making get done. In the process, something unfolds that doesn't happen everywhere in the Republic these days. In-person politics that are civil, friendly, and followed by lunch. But the tradition is under threat. Many people feel they no longer have the time or ability to attend such meetings. Donald Trump's lawyers told a New York appellate court on Monday that it's impossible for him to post a bond covering the full amount of his $454 million civil fraud judgment while he appeals. A state appeals court judge ruled last month that Trump must post a bond covering the full amount to pause enforcement of the judgment, which is to begin on March 25th. Judge Arthur Engoron ruled in February that Trump, his company, and top executives, including his sons Eric and Donald Trump Jr., schemed for years to deceive banks and insurers by inflating his wealth on financial statements used to secure loans and make deals. The lack of excitement many Americans feel about a presidential rematch has heightened interest in alternatives to the major party candidates. None more so than Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose famous name has helped him build buzz for his independent bid. Kennedy is a huge long shot to win electoral votes, much less the presidency. But his campaign events have drawn large crowds of supporters and people interested in his message. He plans to announce his vice presidential nominee later this month in Oakland, California, and is stoking expectations that he might pick New York Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers or former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura. The Supreme Court seems likely to side with the Biden administration in a dispute with Republican-led states over how far the federal government can go to combat controversial social media posts on topics including COVID-19 and election security. The justices seemed broadly skeptical. Monday, during nearly 2 hours of arguments that a lawyer for Louisiana, Missouri, and other parties presented accusing officials in the Democratic administration of leaning on the social media platforms to unconstitutionally squelch conservative points of view. Lower courts have sided with the states, but the Supreme Court blocked those rulings while it considers the issue. The court's decision, in this and other social media cases, could set standards for free speech in the digital age. Gangs have attacked 2 upscale neighborhoods in Haiti's capital in a rampage that left at least a dozen people dead in surrounding areas. Gunmen looted homes in the communities of La Boule and Thomason before sunrise on Monday. They forced residents to flee, as some called radio stations, pleading for police. The neighborhoods had remained largely peaceful despite a surge in violent gang attacks across Port-au-Prince that began on February 29. An Associated Press photographer saw the bodies of at least 12 men strewn on the streets of Pétionville, located just below the mountainous communities of La Boule and Thomason. The Environmental Protection Agency has announced a comprehensive ban on asbestos, a deadly carcinogen still used in some chlorine bleach, brake pads, and other products. The final rule marks a major expansion of EPA regulation under a landmark 2016 law that overhauled regulations governing tens of thousands of toxic chemicals in everyday products, from household cleaners to clothing and furniture. The new rule would ban chrysotile asbestos, the only ongoing use of asbestos in the United States. The substance is found in products such as brake linings and gaskets, and is used to manufacture chlorine bleach and sodium hydroxide, also known as caustic soda. Asbestos exposure is linked to 40,000 U.S. deaths each year. Today's news has been reported by the Associated Press. This has been the World News for Tuesday, March 19th, 2024. Thanks again for joining us at the Dunkley Report.